First epistle of Paul the Apostle to the Corinthians, chapter 7. But this I say, brethren, the time is short.
But this I say,
The time is short.
the time is short.
The time is short. The time is short.
Several privacy watchdogs are launching a joint investigation into the creators of a controversial facial recognition technology. Clearview AI is accused of collecting billions of images of people and making them available to customers, including law enforcement. The purpose? To allow authorities to identify individuals. The CBC's Thomas Daigle is following the story for us and joins us now. So, Thomas, why is this investigation being launched now?
This is another case of technology moving forward and the regulators struggling to catch up to that technology. It seems like both in the United States and here in Canada, police agencies started using this Clearview AI facial recognition technology without it being clear whether it's even legal or not. So today we learned that the privacy watchdogs of Canada, Quebec, British Columbia, and Alberta are all getting together to launch this joint investigation. Here's what they say it's going to focus on. They say the 4 privacy regulators will examine whether the organization's practices are in compliance with Canadian privacy legislation. So this came to the public view about a month ago with a New York Times investigation that showed that this Clearview AI technology, which is being used by hundreds of police forces in the US and Canada, that it can access apparently at least 3 billion images that are available on been scraped from the public internet, so from Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. But in some cases, these are images that someone uploaded. They were meant for their friends, or in some cases, they've even since been deleted off Facebook, but they are still available on Clearview AI, and it's raised all sorts of privacy concerns here and in the United States, as you can imagine.
So what exactly do we know about how this technology has been used in Canada?
Initially, when CBC and other media outlets asked various police agencies across Canada, they said, no, we're not using this. But we have since learned that not only Toronto Police, but several other Greater Toronto Area police forces have used this, at least to test it, and have since been told to stop using it. Other police forces, including Montreal Police, have said they're not saying whether they have or will be using Clearview AI technology. So the entire regulatory framework still has not been worked out. That is what these privacy watchdogs are going to be looking at. You can imagine if this were ever to get in the hands of bad actors, what could happen. If I could take a picture of you and then through this technology within seconds figure out who you are and what you've been doing for years through these publicly available pictures, some of which, as I said, have since been deleted. So there's no timeline for this investigation, but we'll be watching the results.
Made early headlines right here in New Hampshire today. Not even on the ballot here, but what he did that convinced some voters to go with him in Dixville Notch. Of course, the first town to report results, a tiny sliver of a sample, but part of the tradition here, and Bloomberg coming in first. But the former mayor is also being forced to respond tonight to audio that's newly surfaced. On the recording, you can hear Bloomberg talking about the controversial police practice called stop and frisk. Here's ABC's chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl tonight, also right here in New Hampshire.
Michael Bloomberg isn't even on the ballot here in New Hampshire, but he scored a PR coup by coming in first in the tiny, tiny town of Dixville Notch.
2, 1.
There are only 5 voters in Dixville Notch, and Bloomberg called most of them directly.
He called several of us and talked to us and answered questions.
After spending some $200 million on TV ads, Bloomberg is surging in national polls, even gaining support among African-American voters, up to 22% in one poll. But he is facing new criticism after a recording from 2015 surfaced of the former mayor defending his controversial stop and frisk policy. It gave police authority to detain people suspected of committing a crime and searching them for weapons. The targets, overwhelmingly black and Latino.
95% of your murderers and murder victims fit one MO. You can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. They are male, minorities, 15 to 25.
Bloomberg then bluntly described his policy.
We put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why we do it? Because that's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them.
Today, one of Bloomberg's Democratic opponents took aim.
Some people are saying flatly it's racist. What's your take?
Well, yeah, certainly any law enforcement strategy that seems to regard people as profile rather than as human beings, especially seeing how this has disproportionately impacted black and brown Americans, is something that just has no place in an equitable future.
Even President Trump tweeted out the audio with the caption, "Wow, Bloomberg is a total racist."
My opinion in one sentence, that is totally unfair, biased, and everything else, and I'm glad someone took a look at it and made a difference.
Stop and frisk has caused frustration on the streets of Brownsville, Brooklyn, where Monday's court ruling was well received. The area saw 3,020 police stops in the first quarter of this year, the most in the city. A federal judge in Manhattan found that the tactic violated the constitutional rights of minorities. She declared that the police department had adopted a policy of indirect racial profiling. Going forward, an outside lawyer will monitor police compliance with the Constitution.
The decision that was made today, I feel it's okay. It's a good way, a good start to move forward. For them to be monitored is like, yeah, it makes people feel much more safer, especially young guys my age.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good thing, definitely. Because I don't have to walk and look over my shoulder and worrying about, the undercovers running up on me, jacking me up, harassing me. I could be coming from the store, minding my own business or getting off of work, and they just look at me, feel like, oh yeah, let's get this guy right here. Like, hey buddy, what's the problem, It's uncalled for.
But even some people who say they've been innocent targets of stop and frisk see a need for a strong police presence in this particular part of Brooklyn.
There are times, like 25-35% of the time, that when the cops stop people, they do have things on them, like guns, weed, or marijuana, or whatever. And that stuff is what brings the neighborhood down a lot of times, and it only gets worse if the cops don't do their job.
If you stop me and frisk me, please explain to me why.
Bishop Willie Billups believes that stop and frisk has helped make his community safer. He works with gang members in housing projects, as well as the police, to lessen tensions.
Police work is very, very important in the neighborhood. If we didn't have that in the neighborhood, every drug dealer would be set up shop everywhere. We need it, but we need it done correctly. And we need people being treated with respect. That's, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
A police officer came to physically escort me out of the members' tea room, even though he was told I was a member of Parliament. He later sent me a written apology.
Go home, insect face. Go home. Well, which home is that? London, where I was born? Or Palestine, where my mum's from?
Oh, you're drumming on about Muslims. There is a simple solution. Go back to Pakistan.
Speaking to a colleague of mine, she looked at me in astonishment and said, "You know you're having a girl?" Because normally they don't tell people of Asian origin if they're having a baby girl, because, then Asian people decide. And I looked at her and I couldn't believe what she was saying.
Those are just some of the things black and minority ethnic MPs have had to deal with both within Parliament and online. We may have the most diverse set of MPs in history, but for many, Westminster hasn't been particularly welcoming.
Being in the lift and being told this lift isn't for cleaners, trying to go to eat lunch with my team and being told that we're not allowed to go past this point because we're not a member of Parliament. So this bias and this racial bias, flows through society.
There are 65 black and minority ethnic MPs. Of the 37 who responded to our survey, 62% said they had experienced racism, racial profiling or prejudice in the Houses of Parliament. 51% said they had experienced it from fellow MPs, and 81% said they had dealt with racism from the public.
You've, battled your way here, you've broken the glass ceiling, you're actually here where it's going to be equality, you've advocated equality for the whole of the country, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. But actually we're landing somewhere where we don't have that equality. Even if you look at the last few weeks of the select committees, 20 select committees, not one member of Parliament was selected to chair one select committee.
Others are having to cope with racist abuse online.
Whenever I mention anything to do with my background or ethnicity, that comes back. You immediately get that torrent of people who want to tear you down. You learn, I think, to wear an armoured jacket so that you don't listen to it. And actually, I've got as much right to be here as absolutely everyone else.
It's almost people feel there's a license now to challenge things, challenging people's right to be here. And myself, over 50 plus years I've been here. This is my country. Everything I have, everything I want to give back is to this country.
92% of the people who responded to our survey said it was more difficult for them to become an MP because of their ethnicity. What was it like for you, and what challenges did you face?
Some people said to me, why don't you take on your husband's last name, which is an English name, because people won't want to vote for Tulip Siddiq. Well, guess what? They voted for Tulip Siddiq in Hampstead and Kilburn 3 times now.
These instances have led to some questioning their role in politics.
Kind of made me think, is this the right place for me? Should I be here? Can I fight this fight every single day?
There's this idea about where we've become victims. We're actually survivors, and we've survived to get to where we've got to, and we've survived all of the kind of abuse and the narrative. We refuse to be victims, which is why we're here, and we refuse to tolerate that narrative, and we want change for our communities, for a better Britain.
If I go to a school and there's a lot of young ethnic minority women who say to me, what's politics like? Should I join? Actually, I'm caught between a rock and a hard place. Should I be honest with them and say, do you know what, it's actually quite horrible. I don't want to put them off. I want to encourage young women to stand, but I also feel a sense of responsibility, because I think if I do encourage them to stand, am I telling them to walk into the lion's cave?
In a response to ITV News' investigation, a spokesperson for the House of Commons said it is unacceptable that some MPs have experienced racism, and we are particularly concerned to hear of instances occurring on the parliamentary estate. We are committed to taking any necessary steps to ensure this does not happen in future. As it stands, all employees in the House of Commons have to complete annual mandatory training on diversity and inclusion. But there will be plenty of MPs who will argue more needs to be done.
We've heard it before. What some call fake foods are bad for our health. That hasn't stopped us, though, because processed foods are the primary source of calories in the United States, and they cause dozens of serious, even fatal illnesses. Eating fast food 2 or 3 times a week increases the risk of dying from heart disease, which is the leading cause of death in America, by more than 50%. But the standard American diet does much more. It's linked to the modern epidemics of stroke, cancer, autism, Alzheimer's disease, and chronic illness. Fast food is even linked to increased drug addiction, violence, and crime. Health expert Dr. Joel Fuhrman says we can turn our health and our society around by turning back to real food. He tells us how in his new book, Fast Food Genocide, how processed food is killing us and what we can do about it. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Thanks, Lori. This is a rather alarming book. It's called Fast Food Genocide. Dr. Fuhrman is with us, and Doctor, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thanks.
Look, you sound an alarm. It's really very striking about the food we eat. What is it that's going on?
You know, people have to know this information because it is alarming.
Yeah.
We're talking about in urban areas of the country, sometimes called food deserts, 7 times the risk of stroke before age 45, putting young people in nursing homes for the rest of their lives. We're talking about comparing people who are obese and diabetic with eating fast food with more than 10 times the risk of heart attack, and now scientists calculating the amount of years of life lost. You have 45 years of life lost living in an urban food desert compared to people who have more access to healthier foods.
Well, what is it in an urban desert? What do they eat that's so bad for them?
Well, you know, it's permeating all of America now. We have the majority of calories in America now is from fast foods and processed foods. But in certain urban areas, it's even worse because there's no supermarkets, no supermarket access and no produce. Our brain is very fragile. It needs a continual supply of antioxidants and phytochemicals from colorful vegetation. And without that, it deteriorates, it loses intelligence. And we have 1 in 5 Americans now have mental illness that is primarily traced back to not eating sufficient nutrients in the food we're eating.
Now, where do you find these phytochemicals? What should people go for if they're available?
Well, all colorful plants have phytochemicals in them, whereas processed foods and fake foods don't. They're processed out. But I have an acronym I made up so people can remember the foods that most powerfully protect against cancer and extend human lifespan. And that acronym is GBOMBS.
GBOMBS?
GBOMBS. GBOMBS.
All right.
Greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. Greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. Because I want people to eat a lot of these foods because, in other words, nutritional science has made incredible advances where we don't have to have heart attacks and strokes. We can reverse diabetes, become non-diabetic, we can lower the blood pressure, we can prevent cancer even, and we can save the brain in later life not to get dementia through eating right. And while we're having all this great science to tell us how we can protect ourselves, our population's moving the other direction, more dementia, more mental illness, more diabetes, and more disease.
All right. There's been an outbreak of cancer. So many of the people that are dear to me have suffered cancer, and some have died from cancer. In your book, you point out the risks of cancer. Talk about that.
Right, because you know how people think, they say, well, just moderate consumption of fast food is okay. We got to eat mostly. They understand they have to eat healthier, and people agree that it causes obesity and diabetes, but they don't see the link between mental illness and cancer. And the studies show, and I'm reporting the studies from the scientific literature, that 1 serving of French fries in oil that's heated over and over again causes these carcinogenic changes. 1 serving a week increases risk of breast and prostate cancer by more than 25%.
The book of the prophet chapter 4. Even thus shall the children of Israel eat their defiled bread among the Gentiles, whither I will drive them.
Even thus shall the children of Israel eat their defiled bread among the Gentiles, whither I will drive them.
Even thus shall the children of Israel.
Even thus shall the children of Israel.
Even thus shall the children of Israel.
Their defiled bread among the Gentiles. Their defiled bread among the Gentiles.
Even thus shall the children of Israel eat their defiled bread among the Gentiles, whither I will drive them.
Why does the US have far higher rates of foodborne disease than the UK? Is chlorinated chicken safe? And will it be legalized in the UK through a post-Brexit trade deal? Each year in the US, roughly 48 million people get sick from contaminated food. Around 128,000 are hospitalized and 3,000 die. Chicken is washed with chlorine or other chemicals, which is illegal in Europe. It's used to remove germs created through lower farming and animal welfare standards. The UK holds an A rating in the World Animal Protection Index. It's a low bar, but the US only achieves a D overall, and specifically for farm animals. Only 11 of the 50 states limit the use of the most restrictive confinement systems. Veal crates, in which calves can't walk or turn around and are often chained by the neck. Sow crates, where most pregnant pigs are kept in the US. And restrictive battery cages for laying hens, where most US eggs are produced. These systems are largely banned in Europe due to the well-documented physical